Okay, for our listeners and our viewers today, we have an incredible special guest, Mike and Tobin, OBE, entrepreneur, author, expeditionist. I would call him a life capitalist as well, because he's been incredibly successful in business and in life. So this is the first of many to come for SilentEgo. Life beyond the spreadsheet and the soul of the entrepreneur. And what a privilege to have Mike and Tobin to talk about his story of life. And with that subject in mind, he wrote a book called Live, Love, Work, Prosper, which got us here today. And wow, what an amazing journey. So Michael, welcome and happy Monday.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Very, very happy to be here.
Good. So the journey, I mean, where do you start? I mean, good grief. So I thought about where do we start? And I think what I'll suggest is we start with the end in mind and wisdom of the ages. So here we go. I mean, what a journey over the last 30 years, which is captured incredibly well with huge degrees of passion, warmth, and dare I say it, some lovely feminine values. So with that in mind, how did it all come about, Michael?
Well, look, I mean, I think the especially the feminine values side of things, I guess is the recognition that a lot of it is incredible fortune that is not necessarily well deserved. I mean, you know, so many people work incredibly hard out there, and they may not have the fortune or outcome that I've had, and so I would say that you know, huge elements of my sort of current success have been down to what you call fortune, I suppose, and yes, we can say that we make our own luck, you know, and all those things. But actually, you know, there are a lot of people out there that are incredibly talented and don't get the breaks or the opportunities that I've had, and therefore, you know, may not achieve their full potential simply because, you know, the coin comes down on the other side.
Mm. Interesting. So, you know, quite a humble view. So what I'm keen to explore is the journey of, you know, the kind of the egocentric values of almost, you know, going back 25, 30 years ago when you were in that world, and how you've traveled through those decades of experience. And as you've just said, the pivotal people that you've met on that journey that have helped you in some capacity. Just give us a little bit of an insight into that.
So I was born in the East End. I kind of left school at 16. As soon as I possibly could leave school to earn money, I did, and I was working for £30 a week as an apprentice in electronics area with a company called Rockwell Automation. And you know, that was the first thing, is I just wanted to, you know, I didn't want to be. I guess I probably felt that I wasn't bright enough to stay on at school, but also I wanted to earn money. I wanted to get out there and start making a living. And at the age of 7, even before that, my mother took me to Africa to escape my very violent father. And so at that point, you know, I was thrust into new environments. You had to learn different things, and you know, I was petrol bombed a couple of times in what was then Rhodesia during their sort of civil war. Shot at several times. Unfortunately, none of them got me. But yeah, those kind of those times and that upbringing was quite eye-opening, I guess, for a kid. But you know. And then you sort of you come into today's world, and you sort of look at the challenges we have, and you say, well, actually, yeah, yes, they're challenges, and yes, they're big and they're important to everybody. But you know, I always think that I've survived worse, if it makes sense. So you kind of you look at everything in a relative view. So I don't sort of look at situations and go, oh my God, that's terrible, or oh, that's really, you know, you look at a situation, say that's another situation, and you just kind of deal with it, and you get through. but I think, you know, the sort of the luck side of it that I was mentioning earlier on is, you know, little things. I mean, I remember when I was sitting in Bond Street tube station when I actually got the letter that told me I'd got my apprenticeship at 16. And so, you know, back in those days, there was no email or internet or anything, you know, and I was sitting there, I opened up the letter, sitting on a bench in the tube station waiting for the train. And there was an old man sitting next to me. I'm sure he's obviously passed away now, because that was a very long time ago. But he probably couldn't even read what was written on my paper. And as I opened it up, I was delighted, and it said that I got my apprenticeship. And he turned to me and he put his hand on my shoulder as he saw this beaming face of a 16-year-old, 15-year-old, and he said, "Son," he said, "always go the extra mile." He said, "because there's less traffic there." So, and that stayed with me, right? And you know, it's kind of, if you do that little bit more, you see barriers, right, as the things that differentiate you to your competition, not barriers to you. They're the things that you must overcome to make the differentiation between you and your competition. And you know, that in my mind stood out for a very long time.
Wow. So is it fair to say that sort of taking that on board, and it's obviously evident in the book in so many different ways. And, you know, when I completed the book, I said to myself, there was lots of personal synergies, if I'm really candid, in overcoming adversity, you know, making something great of yourself. I think that a lot of people make, you know, good of themselves, but you made great, in my view, with the challenges you had. And I think this is why I want to, you know, reference this book quite a lot, because there's a lot of there's a lot of meaning in it in so many different ways. And I think you call it the sort of the 45-degree lens piece, I think, that you mentioned from time to time. And you're looking at things from a different perspective. But going back to that early day, did you feel when she was sort of gravitating, you know, energy being the word I'm using here, to those sort of, you know, insights, that you had something special? Was there something inside you starting to come alive, this kind of like dormant force of some description? Or,
you know, I'd love to say that, because that sounds like really, really cool, you know, that will happen. But I think the one thing that I guess evolved in my own persona was that I was always the guy making jokes and laughing as a kid, right? I'd always I'd have this massive insecurity inside, and the outside was a kind of a mask that sort of got me through life, right? And so I was always kind of joking and fun and everything, but actually in reality inside I was extremely shy, and the way that I've kind of got on in life is a series of punching above my weight, really, right? So every time I've gone for something, I've kind of, it's this, I've worn the mask. It's just like Jim Carrey, you know. So you put a mask on, you're a completely different character. And so I'd wear this mask, and I'd punch above my weight, and I'd go for things. I'd go for jobs that I knew I had no right in getting, and I'd get them because the mask got it. You know what I mean, right? Yeah. Kind of, there's always this sort of sort of not innocence, but nervous and insecure inside. And then later on in my life, much later, when I met my wife, and I'd been married and divorced at that time. And when I met my second wife, that it was finally a moment where I felt, and I guess I could say she brought it out of me, that I felt that I was enough. You know, I was good enough without the mask. And you know, the interesting sort of similarity between the work environment and real life was there, because, you know, just in work I would try, you know, I would hide my real capabilities. I would also hide my real sort of emotions and capabilities as a you know, in a private basis. So I think that, you know, that was the kind of, sub story of the story, if you like. So I was very, and I guess I try to portray that in the book a bit, because I talk about, you know, the fact that I had lots of affairs, and the affairs were in my first marriage, and the affairs were simply me wanting to be loved. And even when someone did love me, that I didn't believe it. So I wanted to go out and verify. And, you know, and it was always constant sort of, please, you know, can I do it again? Can I convince someone that I'm good enough, you know? And I think that was a lot of the self-inflicted challenges of life that I had at that time.
Yeah, it does come like that. It comes across as this, you know, there is a confession there, isn't there? You can tell.
Yeah, there is, definitely. Absolutely.
But it's almost like you've earned your place to be able to confess. You know, there's a little bit of that. And, you know, it's Shalina, isn't it, your wife? And you could see that she pressed a button. And I know you had to earn well there to get this lady in your life, because I think I can relate to it in a number of ways, but you know, she's clearly been a real pillar of expression for you, and has got you to this wonderful place which you're at now. But equally, you know, to have the sort of, pardon the language, but the balls to express yourself the way you've done it is fantastic. You know, from city entrepreneur, you know, the background. I mean, in my world, I can relate to it from I've been in the tech industry, probably in the same length of time. We've never crossed paths, but I can certainly glean the challenges and, you know, building a business from where you took it, you know, from to, and all the sort of the boardroom challenges that sort of communicated as well. And I think for any of our listeners and viewers today, you know, this is a real, you know, testimony to grit and determination, but equally to come off the back of what you've come off and do what you've done. Once again, this is not, you know, about bolstering your ego, because to be candid with you, I think you've left that somewhere. You know, I think you've managed to, you know, sell it somewhere, Michael, and that's fantastic. But these amazing people in this wonderful journey is just so inspirational. So coming on to sort of, you know, family, and something I picked up from the book about leadership and family, and I know that's a bit further on, it's coming towards the end of the book, where we talk about leadership from the front, and then obviously this heart-centered piece, which is, I think it's the Asian way, so to speak. That was very, very insightful. But then if you peel that back to sort of the spiritual essence of this book, because it does have a spiritual artery right through it, which I found really, really good and really interesting, very educational, you know. I think if you, for me, I did listen to it, I didn't physically read it, but I think if I listened to it 3 or 4 times, I'd probably get 3 or 4 different versions of it. That's how powerful I felt some of the stories were, and insights and experiences.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because when I did the Audible version of it, yes, and I recorded it myself. So my first book, I had someone else record it for me, and I people were saying, like, it's not your voice, and you want to. So I did the second one myself, and I did my third one actually myself as well. But and when I was reading one particular element of it, and remember, I've read this like dozens of times as a proofread and everything else. But when I read it out loud, it seemed different to me, and I actually changed. There's one paragraph. It's quite a large paragraph, but it's one paragraph that I've changed completely in the Audible versus the written, because it just sounded better the way it didn't sound right when I was reading it out loud. But it's fine when you write, you know, when you read it written down as to yourself, but when you actually speak it, it's different. And I think that it sort of symbolizes the nuanced element of the book itself, because, you know, it's kind of, it's not designed as a thou shalt type book, right? It's simply these are my experiences, and if you can tap into them, and if you can articulate, or if you can sort of get something in your life that is the same, then this is a way of viewing it, right, that might help. And so it's not prescriptive in its approach, but it's very it's designed to sort of give the utmost openness. And if you can possibly sort of jump into it, then you may find things that are very, very similar in your own life, sort of thing.
Well, I think I'm going to come on to sort of our current times and in a second or two. But I feel that's the beauty about the book. It's sort of saying, pardon the language, but everybody can do it. There's something in there for everybody. But everybody can do it. And as a kid leaving school at 16, the adversities, the challenge, you can overcome things. But seeing it from these different perspectives, and I relate to it personally as energy. It depends how you interpret it and how you channel that energy to an action, because it's very clear, very action-driven. Even with the latest sort of challenge to the South Pole, that must be... It must have been quite a...
That was brutal.
I bet it was, yeah.
I underestimated that one for sure, yeah.
Did you really? Yeah?
Yeah, I didn't realize it was going to be that tough. Yeah, it was minus 40 degrees permanently. You're dragging a 200-kilo sledge behind you. It's daylight 24 hours a day. You're at 10,000 feet altitude with altitude sickness, and I had no idea how bad it was going to be, how tough it was going to be. It was absolutely brutal. I'm very, very happy I did it. Very happy it's behind me. But I won't do that one again.
Okay, well, that's once again a great confession. But what was the one thing when you completed that? Because this is the other thing about the book, which I come back to is part of your character here, is there is a completion to you. It's like, if you don't mind me saying, I was going to ask a question towards the back end of this conversation, but if you had your time again, I think, what other things would you do? And I think the first one I would jump in with is you would have made a great actor. And I don't mean that in a, but a Hollywood actor. You would have been, because it's this job application piece. I can do it. Give me the opportunity, I can do it. And then obviously at the other end of the continuum, we're off to the South Pole, I can do it. But what was the one thing completing for our viewers and listeners today that you recognized off the back of that?
Well, a couple of years ago, about the time I was doing the book, actually, I did 40 marathons in 40 days as well, which was for the Prince's Trust 40th anniversary year. And again, I've done a couple of marathons in the past, done a few marathons, but to get up every morning and do a marathon before you start work. So I was getting up at 3:30, getting in at 5:30, getting in at 7:30 in the morning, and then start, having a shower and eating my breakfast and then getting to work.
But you've missed one thing, Michael, the massage. It
Yes,
was worth doing the massage.
Yeah. Well, my wife gave me the massage. I'd have an ice bath as well. Yes. If you want all the details in it, which was not very pleasant. But the fact that people say, I don't have time to go to the gym. I don't have time to keep fit and all that sort of stuff. And I was doing that in the morning before my work day started, right? So I fitted it in specifically so that I could do it and not really change my day job. But for me, it's once you've decided, once you've kind of committed to yourself that you can do something, then all other things fit in around that, right? So therefore the difficult part of anything is believing yourself that you can do it, right? And once you get over that hurdle, all the other kind of day-to-day elements of life will fix themselves. It's simply about convincing yourself that you can actually do it. And I've kind of got to a point now where I've got another challenge coming up that my wife won't let me talk about until we're kind of done in our own sort of context. But once she's brought into it, then she will let me talk about it, because she says when I talk about things, they become reality. So if I have something and I say, I'm going to do this, or I'd like to do this, or I'm going to be this, I talk about it a lot and I tell a lot of people, and then the responsibility of doing it becomes enormous. And the downside of not doing it is the shame of not doing it, rather than the fact that I'm even trying it in the first place. So there's a lot about sort of, this kind of building the picture, building the scene, and the acting thing is quite interesting, because if you build the scene build the set, if you like, and then you put yourself in it, then there's nothing else you can do other than be that person, right? So and I do that. I kind of build, I almost subconsciously build the set. I build the scene of what I want to happen around me. And then the actual doing it is not that difficult compared to everything that has gone before.
It's interesting because you're putting yourself into a wrong words, but making the point, almost a state of insecurity deliberately. So you're putting yourself into a volatile state and then using the power of your vision, and then you're feeling your way through this whole experience to the point of like a manifestation.
It is really interesting you say that, because it is, I choose to do things that I know I'm very uncomfortable doing, or I know deep down. And again, it's very different on the outside. The outside is, fine, it'll be fine, it'll be good. No, but deep down, I'm terrified with. And it's a way of kind of pushing that sort of internal fear to the nth degree. And I mean, the one thing that I guess I'm still afraid of in a way, and I don't know whether, and I'm still trying to work it out, is death. And not because death is a scary thing in itself, like, it's going to hurt or anything. But I'm really fearful about what it's going to be. How am I going to be 6 foot under the ground and all this life is going to be going on above me, and I'm not party to it, and I'm not involved in it, and that's really annoying. That's kind of, and it's not fear, it's annoyance that I probably can't do anything. I probably can't do anything about that.
Well, that's it. That's really really interesting. I think that, coming at it from a slightly different perspective, if I look at ego and I look at the journey of life from beginning to end, is I think that we're always chasing where we came from, if that makes sense, at a holistic level. I kind of feel that. But coming on to the book, I mean, there's some lovely messages here for people right now. We're going through some quite interesting times. And this was, when we talked in the book about family business and, actually, you did deals, business is business, but you said it in such a way that it was about the accumulation of friends, and I see the times we're in right now, B2B, B2C, call it what you like. We're in the P2P business. It's never going to change. It always was. Process gets in the way. We know that. But we tend to manufacture sort of adversity and things. But the message here is, it came along loud and clear to the entrepreneur, the young guy right now that's possibly unemployed, going through these sort of challenging economic times. And by the way, I see nothing but opportunity for everybody. But it depends, comes back to your point, Michael, about how you look at things. We use that half empty, half full measure yardstick. But the long and short of it is, it's about harnessing that energy in the appropriate way and making things happen, bringing things to life. And we have become, and I see it from the corporate perspective, we can become sort of too conditioned to that sense of belonging. Well, now that's uncoupling, this whole next generation of entrepreneurs is being born. And I think that's why I reference this book so heavy, because I think there's some real lessons in there that is so profoundly expressed that you can do it, and you've just backed it up, and it's fantastic. So with that in mind, family business, we're now working from home. We're working with our, we've got our husbands, and the husband and wife are in the front room. They're the boardroom now, is the front room, right? And we are inviting our clients to our front room, words to the effect.
And the funny thing is, I had this, I'm chairman of 2 public companies, and both of them, we had the AGMs this year in my hallway. So we were in full lockdown, full sort of round 1 lockdown, and basically I had one other, and the government hadn't worked out what to do with an AGM where you physically need to have corporate shareholders and everything else. So what we did was, in my hallway, I had a very brief script written out, and I opened the front door. One of the other shareholders came to my front door, didn't come in. And and literally we stood there, and I read out the script, and that was it. That was the AGM. And I did that for both businesses. And you know, this is nothing you could even imagine, you know, a year ago. It was just, you know, it's unheard of type of sort of actions, right? But you get through, you find a way to do something. And even having an AGM sounds ridiculous now, right? That the fact that they have to have a group of people coming together to do this, whereas you should be able to do it on Zoom. So you know, I'm sure we won't be having the same AGM profile going forward as we did before. But that, you know, this time has changed us so immensely and rapidly, right? In the way that we think about work and the way that we think about life. You know, and what's important to us. You know, we loved the restaurant scene beforehand, right? And even between the two lockdowns, we kind of strayed out to restaurants again, and we buy these home kits from the top restaurants all the time, and it feels like we're sort of hanging on to something that we liked before, but actually what we're finding now is they're not as good. We're actually now going into real home cooking, and we get deliveries of vegetables now instead of these home kits, and we're starting to make our own sort of, you know, our own creations, and we're sort of thinking now maybe we should open a restaurant because we're getting really good at this stuff. And so, you know, this 1 year has given everybody a massive learning opportunity if they're able to see it that way rather than a pain opportunity. You know,
I think you're absolutely right. I resonate with it, with the work we're doing with, I've got two businesses myself. I've got EgoStream that supports the growth of the technology industry, which is flourishing nicely, but Zengility.life, which is all about helping people, you know, transition from corporate life, which comes back to the book once again. I can't reference this enough, Work-Life Integration, where we're now doing the merger. And I'm working personally, and it echoes exactly what you're saying. Firstly, there's lots of opportunity. And secondly, a lot of execs now looking to sort of say, well, you know what, I don't want to go back to that environment. I took a voluntary, I call it voluntary freedom, right? They used to call it redundancy. Now it's voluntary freedom. And I'm saying, hey guys, come and talk to me because I want to help you sort of reinvent yourself and access the new version of you know, in hypothetical terms. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah, so it's good. And, you know, like I said, I think that going back to the book again, not to overcook this, but I think there's a lot of good meaning in it in the sense that it can be done. And that is one of my, you know, if I write a book, Michael, it'll be called It Can Be Done, because, you know, I'm a big believer that it can be done. It doesn't matter what age you are, which, you know, the young guy, but equally there's a lot of people out there right now in their mid to late 50s that are too young to retire, too old to work, you know, that sort of headset. For me, that's bullshit. You know, we're living in the time of the ages, where wisdom of the ages, communicating through the glassroom, the screen. There's never been a better opportunity for the wiser guys in our industry. I'm talking the technology industry, obviously, because I know it as deeply as you do. But not as successful as you, Michael, I've got to say. But, you know, that's I didn't come on the course 25 years ago, so it was, but neither did you by the sounds of the book. So life experiences, eh? So
yeah, it's the best lessons in life. Yeah.
Exactly, and I've got your next book, by the way, and you know, obviously, I'm sure we can do the deal, but good. It's called Life Force, right? How's about that for a title, Life Force, right?
That's pretty good. Actually, this was my next one, Lifting the Floor.
Yes,
that came out in September, and that is kind of a story of the industry itself, right? And that shows how even the people that had the brilliant insights at the beginning, that were the kind of the founders of the industry, very often they don't make the money out of it, right? And because there's a disconnect between their brilliance of vision and the kind of how do I exploit it type lessons. So you know, I wouldn't call myself academic by a very, very long stretch, right? And so I would say that I've got the kind of the hustle skills rather than the scientific skills of life, if you know what I mean. And I think if you get the two together, or if you can form a partnership of the two together, then you're destined to greatness.
I think so. And I go right back to the beginning and those early profound experiences that strengthened you for what I would call street wisdom. You know, whether you were conscious or not conscious, it's very evident in the deals that you did, the acquisitions that you've made, and, you know, the prevalence. And I come back to, you know, this, I remember there's a chapter in the book where you were talking about running across, I think it was London Bridge or Tower Bridge, sort of when you were training or doing the marathons at some God crazy hour or whatever. And I think you were on the phone to somebody in Hong Kong or somewhere, or, you know, and I was just thinking, and then I got a bit further and it's sort of the advert you did with the Joker, you know, you're really pushing the boundaries there. But actually they bought into it. You know, it's having that sort of ability to not conform, you know, break the rules. Come on, that's what this is about.
And you know, the great thing about you know, the reason I was doing the marathons at that time in the morning was so I could continue with working, right? Because I couldn't afford to take 40 days off work. Even though I was on sort of non-exec roles all over the place, but and you're right, it was Tower Bridge, and I actually, because it was Hong Kong, they were on a different time zone. So I was happy to do the call because I was up anyway. It was 5 a.m. And they just didn't, they couldn't believe that I was literally on the board call with my headset, running on Tower Bridge, having completed most of a marathon at that point, almost home. And but you can do all these things, and there's no reason why you have to be sat in a boardroom to do a board call, right? There's no reason that while you're running, you're not doing something else. And you know, and I think that you know, we this time in our lives is above all else the opportunity to think about things in a different way, and we should be sort of saying, well, you know, just because it was okay before to do it like this, or just because it was the only way to do it like this before, then we shouldn't be saying the same going forward. We should be thinking about, you know, what is the new normal?
Yeah. I completely agree. And I think the work-life integration is a very smart expression. I think work and life have become one. And I think it's all about the adaptation going forward. I mean, I'm a massive fan of it. I saw it coming 10 years ago plus, you know, post.com crash. You know, it was predicted. You know, we all knew technically where we were going to end up. But if we look at the future for the next 10 years, as I see it, I mean, the pace of change is massive at the minute. We know that. You know, a day feels like a week feels like a month feels like a quarter, and so on and so on. But I think like I say, coming back to the champion, and if it can be done, overcoming it, integrating your life with work is a smart choice, because once you begin to sort of, and okay, we're all novices to a point with it because we haven't been conditioned that way, but I think you champion it really well with these, you know, the Tower Bridge story and all the other environments that you were in. You never tried to separate the two in some respects. And okay, there were some early years where it did get the better of you. It's evident in the book, right? But I think the wisdom came off the back of that, not to be repeated. But this goes back to where we are right now, is there's never been a greater opportunity to harness new thinking with new energy. And I think that that's something I gleaned with yourself, is about that alignment of energy. So with that in mind, I just wanted to sort of highlight to our our listeners today and viewers, etc., about how, Michael, you talk a lot about fitness and health as being a real capital pillar of, you know, the lead. You got, you know, I think you quote the Steve Jobs piece quite a few times, which I think is really, you know, quite simple. You know, if you look after yourself, you know, the oxygen mask piece, you can lead others. Yeah. You know, I love that.
So you know, my approach to charity, right, is something that starts from yourself, right? So you've got to, if you're not perfect, not perfect, but if you're not in great shape, whether that's physically or mentally, it's very difficult for you to help anyone else. right? So if you want to help someone else, you've got to start from yourself, right? Because the amount of effort, the amount of effort you'll put into doing something for someone else, and which may or may not be helpful and may be harmful. If you could do that to yourself and make yourself a better person or a fitter person or whatever, then you'll have 10 times the power to go and do what you wanted to do for someone else. So I think this whole kind of concept of charity is super important. I mean, the being benevolent is part of being, I think, a decent person, but it has to start with yourself. It has to start with, am I, can I do anything else for me first, right? And then the multiplier value of your goodwill that you wanted to do for someone else before anyway is enormous, right? If you just get your own bit right. And I think that's often missed because we're naturally, generally people are nice people. They want to do nice things for others. But if you're not straight yourself first, then you're kind of wasting a lot of effort and wasting a lot of energy.
Mm. It's interesting, and I think the other, one of the points, about your being in touch, your phone, you're always there, and when we talk about this work-life integration and fitness and mindset and all the rest of it, it is all about that absolute completeness, isn't it? There is a completeness, and that's something I got from the book. Actually, there was a completeness to it. And I think that's why I felt there was a lot of warm vibration coming from the book. I mean, it had its extremes, but to be honest, there was a lot of really good completion there.
Well, that's really, really kind of you to say, actually, because, a number of, you take the phone example, a number of people say to me, why do I have the phone on the table all the time, even at dinner, in a restaurant? Why is the phone there, And I say, well, look, I look at, so that's not a ball and chain for me. It's a liberation for me. It's a kind of, let's say I have lots of businesses all over the place, even let's just say that I have kids that are, independent now, and I want to make sure they're always okay. Right. And so if I don't have a phone there, that 99% of the time is sitting there, not ringing, right? But I know could ring if there was a problem, then my mind is 100% at the table, because I don't have to worry about all the things that could be happening that aren't, right? So if I didn't have my phone and it was in the sort of in my coat in the cloakroom, half of me would be thinking, oh my God, what if there was an emergency and someone was trying to get a hold of me and all this sort of stuff. So I wouldn't be at the table. I'd be slightly away. Whereas if the phone is there and it's not ringing, I'm 100% engaged. So it's not the thing that distracts me. It's the thing that makes me focused.
Yes. Yes, it does. It does immensely. I can personally relate to it. And I think that what I picked up, once again, a pearl of wisdom from the book, is ready to respond, not ready to react, ready to respond. And I think that I find it hard to disconnect. So if he talks about, yes, I have rituals and routines for chill time, all of these sort of great things that you work out as you get to the sort of certain stages of wisdom. I don't like the word age anymore, because I think it's all about the power of wisdom, Michael. So let's get that in. And for you veterans that are listening today, life is about to begin, right? So if you're being released from the shackles of the corporation, it could be the best thing that's ever happened. Okay, so it can be done, and I think that's important. But family, you talk a lot. It's just right through the core of the book, the heart of the family.
Yeah, no, it is, and your comments there about sort of finding it hard to disconnect, and it's almost it's almost like you shouldn't need to even feel you need to disconnect, right? So work and life should be so seamless that you shouldn't even think about, I need to just relax, or
yes,
relaxing is it should be part of your work. It's if you're not relaxed in your work, then you're doing the wrong work, right? So
yes,
and I understand there are people that obviously a bus driver can't disconnect and reconnect, and he's got a job and then he doesn't have a job, right? So he's driving a bus that he isn't driving a bus. But for a large part of the population, it's more sort of, it's a mental thing rather than a physical skill thing, right? And while we're using our brains to do what we think we are paid to do, we can easily chill out, we can easily de-stress. And when people say they're stressed at work, they shouldn't be, because they're being paid to be at work, for goodness sake, right? They're not being paid to be stressed. So if you're stressed, there's something else happening. There's something else that's making you stressed. It's not the job. You took the job knowing that you'd love to do the job, and you thought you were going to do a good job and you were going to get paid for it. So the being stressed bit of it is something else. It's maybe conflict with a colleague, a work colleague, or something at home, or and you've got to kind of break these things down into the realities of what they are, as opposed to labeling them simply, I've got a bad job, or I've got a my life's crap, or we kind of label them, but actually drill down and you find there's very simple things that you can fix. And saying we don't have time to relax, or we don't have time for this, that's also nonsense, right? So you say, well, what we all have the same 24 hours a day, so if someone has time for something, then someone else should have time for it. So what are you doing in replacement of that in that time?
And I think that's I picked that up. I felt that there was this, there's that classic sort of who you are and what you are. And I think what I interpreted is everybody will look at Michael as who he is, but no, he actually demonstrates quite nicely through the book and the journey what he is. It was almost a different perspective. Once again, there was a different sort of way of actually looking at it. But I think as we march forward into the next number of years, the sort of evolutionary stages that we're in the Great Reset that's coming, etc., technically and commercially, and how we're going to be living our lives, I think there's a lot of real supportive material here for people to embrace, and to help them make decisions. And I think that was very clear that you were good at making decisions, good, bad, or indifferent, by the way. But you did embrace it well. Was you were prepared to sort of take the knock, every now and again. But
well, decisions are interesting, right? So I've got two rules about decisions, right? So one is you have to make one. Mm-hmm. Right. And the harder it appears to be, the less important the decision is, because if you're deciding about two things that are like, oh yeah, if I did this, or they're both so good, we'll just do one of them, because actually neither is bad. And if they're both bad, then neither is worse than the other, right? So the easy decisions are the ones that are so obvious. The hard decisions are the ones that are not obvious, but actually mean less. Because they're both probably as good as each other. Otherwise, they wouldn't be difficult decisions. So first of all, the first thing is make a decision. The second thing is don't make a decision until the very, very last moment that you've defined is the moment that you can make a decision, right? So let's say, for example, on Tuesday, you have to sign this piece of paper or that piece of paper. Well, don't decide a week before which one you're going to do, because things happen. Elements, more input will happen to influence what you're going to do. So leave so the first thing is identify the very, very last moment you have to make a decision. And then don't make a decision until that moment, right? Those are the two key things. And then when you have to make the decision, remember that the obvious ones are the most important, and the less obvious decisions are less important, because both things are very similar. That's why you can't make a decision. So they're not important. Then just do it. So I think it's, I get things wrong fairly regularly. But I think the negative impact of getting something wrong is less than the negative impact of not making a decision in the first place.
I term that decision dysfunction. And I think there's a lot of it around, being candid with you. But I love that sort of appreciation of the calculation of a decision, because it goes back to something you just mentioned, really early on in this story, of the real time. It working in a real time capacity, being able to sort of respond in the moment in the appropriate way, and creating, pardon the language, but the creation of the look, that has a big part to play in it. Because if you sort of be too prescriptive about it, we'll all just write the book and follow the book. There is a navigation here, isn't there? There's that sort of totally oscillation of the timing's got to be right. So timing, you're working with the elements, aren't you, in some respects?
Yeah, you are. Because there's no right or wrong in anything, right? There's no, there's kind of, there's ways to think about things that might give you better outcomes. But for me to tell anybody, as I say, my books, none of my books are prescriptive. They're all kind of observations, and they're kind of, this worked for me. And if you can draw any elements out of that will be helpful, that's great. But it may not work for anyone else in an absolute way. You have to kind of draw from it, and I think that's the key I'm very aware that I didn't go to university, and I didn't even go to sixth form. So I'm not an answer. I'm only a kind of a bit of a mirror that people can use.
But that's it's wonderful to hear that, because that really does, once again, that just, everybody's looking for some sense of approval to get on in life. And, at the end of the day, if you're fit, you're healthy. I sometimes, in my moments of, adversity and challenge, I boil it down. I'm quite a spiritual guy anyway, but I say to myself, if we have oxygen today, we're okay. The day that dries up is the day that things aren't good. But sorry.
Well, I was going to say, so one of my, I think I mentioned him in the book as a lovely friend of mine that I've known for 20 years is a yogi from Mumbai called Jagdish Parikh. And throughout my time at Telecity, I used to bring him in every year to talk to the management team for a day and a half. And amongst many other things, he used to sit everyone down and say, breathe, right? And then he'd teach you how to appreciate your breath. And when you start to sort of understand how your breath comes in and out of you and all these sort of things, it's the most basic fundamental thing that we ever do is breathe, right? You mentioned it. It's like, as long as you've got oxygen, and that's why it came to my mind. But if you then start from there, everything else is a bonus, right? And if you realize how wonderful it is that you're breathing, even without even knowing it, right? When you're sleeping, you're breathing, and it's this function that we do and we take for granted, but it's so essential and so so key to everything. And he says and it's the one thing you will do right until your very last breath, right? And then you won't. And it's the thing that will be with you from the moment you were born to the moment you die. And we don't even appreciate it. And so if you start with that kind of basis, then all other things around you start to become more interesting. And the small wins of life become incredibly good. They go, wow, I just did that. And that's a win.
And I think, once again, coming back to the pearls of wisdom, there was, you mentioned, didn't elaborate it too deeply, but there was little touches that I thought were nice and I would say sensitive. And it was very clear that there's a lot of sensing going on here, in the sense of, simplicity of, the beauty of a good night's sleep, what I would call the brilliant basics of life, which is sleep, nutrition, exercise, recuperation, kind of everything that alludes to that peaceful state of, I wouldn't necessarily say balance, but harmony, And I think in some respects, it's that sort of goes back to the beginning about, you've produced a great song, and then you produced a great song and then made an album. And now, as we come on to a bit of a conclusion here, Michael, what's next, and what's the new movie? What's coming? Yeah.
Well, actually, funny enough, so I mentioned the third book earlier on, which is kind of the journey of the data center industry per se. And I think in 100 years, we'll look back at the data center industry as the physical space that the internet lives, and how important, it'd be like the railways of the 1800s. It'll be like that sort of sort of Isambard Kingdom Brunel type, sort of look at the sort of the world. But I've also got, actually, because I feel so strongly about this particular book and the whole living and working balance and integration. I've written another one, which is basically a version 2 post-COVID of that, because we've been forced, as you mentioned, to adopt this kind of working from home, and probably some people have done it better than others, but probably we won't be returning to what we assumed was normal before, right? I think very few people will be going back and going into the office every day unless they absolutely have to, right? And whereas before people felt that it was kind of like not right to be working from home, now it's absolutely perfect to, it's completely normal to work from home. So I think what the world will look like with all these buildings we have around us in the cities, most of that commercial real estate, what's that going to be turned into? And the way that we look at the world going forward is going to be very, very different, regardless of if we find a cure, well, when we find a cure, when we find a vaccine, and let's say COVID disappears from the face of the earth, the world will be very different because of it, and what we've learned in our abilities to be different during that time. So I think that that's something that probably needs to be investigated more, or examined more. But I think what you're doing, and giving people added value around the sides of their life, I think is super important. It's just we're so locked into being this thing that we sort of mold ourselves into by the age of 25, and then we just build on it and make it a bigger thing by the age of 40 and 50 and 60. We forget that the edges of our life are far more important than we give them credit for. And you're making sure people don't lose those. So I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think as we summarize, Michael, one thing that I'll just add to it, and I think you expressed it in so many different ways throughout the book, and for our readers, listeners and viewers today, there's one thing that came across loud and clear, and I think we all need to appreciate this as we go forward, is home is where the heart is. And I think that message comes across loud and clear. And if we can harness our strength through the heart and express ourselves to a new level, I think the future's ours, and we can have it on our terms in the appropriate ways, as you've beautifully expressed to date. And I passionately believe that you're at the beginning of the next chapter of, or the next movie, Michael. But with that in mind, I'd just like to say thank you so much for spending a great Monday morning. What a great kickoff. You are definitely living the life beyond the spreadsheet, and certainly you have definitely got a soul in business. So I want to just say thank you so much for attending SilentEgo's podcast, and we look forward to staying close and following each other on the journey. And thank you.
Brilliant. My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.